Judith Dreyer. Thank you for joining me for this podcast series, The Holistic Nature of Us. My intent is to take us, you and I, into a better understanding of the concepts behind our holistic nature and how that ties directly to the holistic nature of the world around us. How can we connect the dots in practical ways that we are nature and nature is in us? I will be featuring authors and educators, practitioners and others whose passion for this earth helps us create bridges. We'll see what's trending, what's relevant to our world today, not just for land use, but to connect the dots between ourselves and nature. It's time for practical action and profound interchange so our natural world is valued once again. And today I am so delighted to introduce you to Rebecca Wildbear. She's a therapist and wilderness guide since 1997 and does river and soul guides for the Animas Valley Institute. She is the creator and founder of Wild Yoga and offers classes and programs out of Durango, Colorado. She supports people in discovering their soul's deepest longing and living a life of creative service while rediscovering their deep belonging with the Earth community. Hi, Rebecca. Good morning. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Rebecca, I've met you in kind of a synchronistic way. I received Father Rohr's daily newsletter. He's the founder for the Center for Action and Contemplation down in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he often writes about how important nature is, not only for our own growth and development as a human being, but more than that. We need nature. He stresses that over and over again. He quotes Bill Plotkin, who's the founder of the Animas Valley Institute, in the March newsletter about Soulcraft, his programs, connecting to nature, and again, deep personal growth. And the question I have for you is, are we listening? Today we are in a time of extraordinary challenge. We have very endangered species. We have imperiled ecosystems, and there's a lot of deep concern. Are we doing enough in a timely enough fashion? So tell me about this dot we're trying to connect today between what you do and nature and how important our connection is.
Great. Thank you. One of the ways that I feel like I'm supporting the shift that needs to happen in our world is in shifting people's consciousness. I think it's Joanna Macy who talks about holding actions, actions that support new technology and creations, and also shifting consciousness. And shifting consciousness is kind of the focus. And of course, being out in nature and being in relationship with nature is one way that happens, because one way our consciousness deeply needs to shift is the realization that we're really connected to the earth, that we're, she's our mother. We all of the elemental parts of us come from her body, and we would certainly not be alive without her. And how could we move into a reciprocal relationship with her, as well as coming to understand our own wild nature, our own animal being, and also our soul, which is connected to our inherent purpose for why we're here.
Well, tell me more about that. We're a little reluctant sometimes to talk about our wild nature. It conjures up, all kinds of stereotypes. Give my listeners a little bit of an understanding of the wild nature soul. Tell us more.
Yeah, great. Sometimes it can be mistaken. Wild is sometimes used in a party or loud fashion, and not that it can't happen that way, but wild really means, I like Bill Plotkin's definition in his Wild Mind book, self-willed. It's our innate animal self-willed way of being. It's unique. So my wild way might be different from your wild way. And it can be subtle and small and quiet, and gentle. But it's a natural, inherent way that we are, when we're not trying to say, have all the overlays in our head of how we're going to conform to what everybody else wants us to do or what the culture wants us to do. It's just the natural way that our heart and our body want to move. It has to do a lot with our emotions, our erotic nature, our spontaneity, our present-centeredness. And, you can think about the archetypes Artemis and the Green Man for the ones that just grew up. Those archetypal figures just grew up and are most at home in the natural world. And no matter who we are, we all have a part of ourselves like that. It might be hidden or latent or in shadow, or it might be just ready to burst and have some time, and all it needs is some time and it would connect. But either way, it exists in all of us, and it's a really foundational part of our wholeness, absolutely necessary for, our journey in life.
I agree with you. I do a lot of dream work, and I love Thomas More's work and Carolyn Mace's work with archetypes and Andrew Harvey, all those great folks out there that are getting it into mainstream consciousness, how important understanding our soul nature is. So you take folks out into nature on river trips, mountain trips. How do you connect them with that part of themselves?
Oh, well, we have... there's so many ways. First of all, just being out there. The wilder the place, the better. That's why I love river trips. It takes you out away from any roads or trails. But the wilder we can go. Although I've done this work on connecting to your wild self with people even in a city or in a retreat center, it can happen. So there's a lot of kinds of invitations. Everything's always an invitation. There's wanders on the lands people can go on to embody their wild indigenous one. And we also have suggestions for ways that you can do that. There's movements you can do. There's things that you can say, and when you're in conversation with the land. There's also ways of working with resistance. So if there's parts of you that are shutting you down from embodying that, a lot of times we have voices in our head. This is really strange. This is so different. Don't move like this. So, if you're really blocked in those ways, then we gotta work with where that's coming from and how that's trying to keep you safe. There's also ways, I do wild yoga, which is a kind of a body movement. So when we get into our body, I always say my yoga is not Simon Says. Don't do what I'm doing. Do what your body wants. I have suggested movements, but my hope in my yoga classes is that people follow their own flow, and I offer a lot of choices so that people at different levels. I work with a lot of beginners on my quests. People come who've never done yoga, so I have to teach a very gentle class with some other options for some of the people that have done a lot of yoga, but so that there's an option for people that don't have much experience in that to get into their body and have an experience. I have people often who tell me, oh gosh, I never would have thought yoga was something I liked, but I really loved your class. And it's because they just got into their bodies, and everyone can do that. And also, dance and movement of any kind is a way that brings us into our body. So we do a lot of experiential dance movement kind of things as well.
Well, cool. They say, when you dance, the earth dances with you, I love that kind of connection. Do you take people out, like in recovery, serious illnesses? Is it about adolescence, or is it any stage of life that's looking to move to the next stage of life?
Yeah, I used to, I'm a former psychotherapist, and I used to work with people in recovery, in wilderness therapy. And I utilized a lot of these practices with those people as well, and I think they work great with those, with people in recovery as well. And most of the programs that I guide now are more focused towards soul encounter, and that's hearing the subtleties of soul. So we recommend that people have a certain amount of sobriety time already, at least a few months, before coming on a program. Otherwise, they might be so overwhelmed by the addict part that is just getting used to not using, that they might not be able to hear some of the other things that we offer. Not that somebody could still benefit, but it's just better to have a little bit of time in sobriety first. But either way, these practices, I would say, work for everybody and anybody to connect to your wild self. There isn't anybody in any place in life, in any stage, with any trouble that wouldn't benefit. In fact, I love Bill Plotkin's model, Wild Mind, because it is all about embracing our wholeness rather than our pathology. And most psychotherapeutic or traditional psychotherapy is focused on problem, the diagnosis, and this is focused on wholeness, embracing our wild self and embracing the other aspects of our wholeness as a way to support ourselves in growing into who we really are, and that from there it will give us the strength to address whatever troubles that we have.
Do you find people are open to working with the medicine wheel? I see that Bill's programs are based on the four directions. Are they open to prayer when they get out there? That kind of respect with nature?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, most people who sign up for Animas programs have read the website. At least half have usually read at least one of Bill's books. So they have a sense of what they're signing up for and the kind of thing, and they're really ready to go. Occasionally somebody comes who it might be very different too, but they usually seem able to kind of jump in and give it a try. My recent edge is how to reach out to the larger world that might not be somebody that would sign up for a program like that. You know, I'm working on a book and how to write it in a simple way so that it might invite people in who wouldn't normally pick up that kind of thing. That's a real edge.
Well, good for you. We need that. We need that kind of thing out there. So, what's been the most inspiring part of this work for you?
Oh my gosh, there's been so many inspiring parts. I feel inspired every time I guide a program. And that's because in watching what happens for people with the land, I never cease to be amazed, really, at what's possible, even in a 5-day program. And I suppose particularly on quests, which are 3 days and 3 nights of solo, you know, people go out. First of all, the people that we get that come to sign up and pay money to fast for 3 days and 3 nights, I mean, you can imagine they're already pretty extraordinary people willing to offer themselves and their attention to the earth in that way. And then the gifts and mysteries that they come back with, it's just always, can't remember what your question was, but I'm always astounded by what can happen for people. And I'm ever turned on in this work by the possibility and potential for our people. And I suppose that's what keeps me going, you know, because sometimes it is hard traveling and guiding, you know, going, being around people all the time. But I just really believe that this is the best possibility that, you know, that I can come up with for what could help our people. And so the idea is that people come on programs not just to make a better life for themselves. In fact, sometimes they could potentially even make it worse for themselves. That's always a possibility in terms of what gets asked for them could be something that's challenging and bigger responsibility, or letting go of something that they valued. Although often people do feel stronger and more whole and more of themselves and more vibrantly alive after the programs. The point isn't necessarily one's personal happiness as much as it is listening to their purpose, their mission, their soul, what they're here to do for all of us, for the earth, and how to grow into a mature elder that they are.
Yeah, that's what I really get inspired myself with. You know, I see so much innovation out there. We know that there's serious problems, right? Doug Tallamy, in his book, Bringing Nature Home, he talks about the fact that there's over 4,000 species that are endangered today. And we can't see that easily because if we have a bluebird in our neighborhood and we might have, you know, a grosbeak, we think, okay, we've got some variety here, not just the robins and the blue jays. But what we don't see is that how those populations are declining. And when I talk about nature, it's raising the awareness of how beautiful it is and how precious it is, and to get people turned on to going back home and maybe taking another step, another action that brings in more respect and honoring to this planet for everything that we've gotten from it. You know, we seem to be takers is what I'm getting at. And how can we give back? What does soul work or soulcraft do about giving back to nature?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, it's kind of in this kind of work, in a way, the giving and the receiving are a little bit similar. It's not such a, you know, in the gross modern world, we take resources and things, and we take things and we use things. In soulcraft practices, we're giving our attention, we're giving our presence, we're giving our time, we're giving our listening ear. But we all also are asking deep questions, things that we want to know, and our ego and what it wants to know and what it takes can definitely be involved. But also, nature generally doesn't always give the ego its answer in that way. It gives it the lesson or experience that feels it's most necessary for us to have. And in our openness to really taking in the guidance and wisdom that the beings of the earth, that the animate natural world wants to reveal, that is a kind of giving, and it's a kind of a surrendering to our ego's comfort and our ego's agenda, and opening ourselves to the guidance and the wisdom that the earth is actually wiser than we are, that our mind is limited in what it can come up with, and what if we turned our attention to the earth. And we also do have gratitude practices as well while we're out there. But I often think of our quest ceremony, which is a 3-day, 3-night solo, as one of the most beautiful giving to the earth. It's like I'm going to empty my belly, be uncomfortable for 3 days and 3 nights, because I so long for a connection with you and the wisdom that you would have to share.
Well, that's an interesting comment. Years ago, I did a vision quest with my elder, and you're right. The point is for us to give up something, to say, we value you so much, we're willing to give up something, and let's see what you have to teach us. The rub is, so to speak, what kind of an answer do we get in the moment? And it may not come, as you said, in the way that we want. It's going to come the way we need, and that's another lesson for our society, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. It is. And that's, that is kind of the ego maturing, the adolescent ego that wants its way, that's destroying everything in order to get it, in order to keep its comfort, security, money, whatever it is that it wants. How can our ego really let go of those things and be initiated to a more mature way of holding everyone, all the people, all the earth in its consciousness, so that it can operate and make decisions more out of what's best for all?
Yeah, I like that. I love the idea of connecting the dots with the quest, with an emptying, and then hopefully being open to receiving in any way, shape, or form that it's best for us to come in and get out of our ego mind about how that should happen. So tell me more about your work with your guides, and do you have any personal experiences yourself with connecting to soul and receiving guidance from nature?
Oh yeah, I have a whole lot of experience in that. And connecting to soul. One of the ways our programs at Animas focus on soul encounter. Connecting to nature, but also having a soul encounter.
Could you relate one for us?
Sure, I can share one that happened on my very first Animas quest, which was about 15 years ago. So soul encounters, there's often multiple soul encounters, and so just having one doesn't mean you're done. There's multiple until what Bill would call soul initiation, which means until the balance is tipped, where you have such a full sense of your soul that your ego has become initiated in living a life in service to it. So this encounter that I'm going to tell you is more early on, which was on my first Animas quest when I was 30 years old. So 15 years ago, almost actually 15 and a half years ago. And one of the suggestions that we get offered is to ask for our name. That's kind of one way of having a soul encounter, is getting a whisper from a being out there about, well, what is my name? Which doesn't mean just what is my name, but really, what is my purpose? Or it might be, what is my purpose right now? Or what is the purpose you want me to most focus on right now? So I asked that question every day while I was fasting, what is my name? And nature didn't give me an answer. Sometimes it didn't respond, and other times it kind of teased me. I heard like spot or things like that, or you're not really ready for a name, which was probably pretty true actually. But my last day I was the weakest. So of course when you're the weakest, you're the most open. And I walked to my stone pile and back up, which was down a steep hill and back up a hill. And my heart, which happens oftentimes when you fast, was beating really, really, really fast. And I was feeling close to death, which reminded me of when I had cancer. So I had cancer when I was 21, and I was close to death. And I believe that was perhaps my first soul encounter, although I didn't know that that's what was happening at the time. But that experience completely shifted my sense of the world and my sense of myself. But I was feeling that connection to that time of dying. And I went up to the rock, the gray rock that was huge, that called me to that vision quest place. And I asked again, what is my name? And this time I did hear an answer. Braveheart was the name I heard. And of course my immediate response was, no, that's not my name. That's a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden I just had flash before me all the times in my life where I had been a brave heart and how delighted and full I felt. And then all the times these moments passed before me where they were sort of missed opportunities where I could have been, and like I turned in the other direction for some reason, and the heartbreak of that lost moment. And then I had a sense then that it was true. So I asked the juniper pinyon forest, I said, what's my name? About 3 times. And in a chorus, they repeated it. And so, so that was kind of a first soul encounter. And, because I wasn't fully, I call myself a toe dipper. That means I was trying this out. It was my first quest. I wasn't, when I got back and I was eating food again, I still wasn't quite ready to commit to that name. So it took another 6 months of waking up in the middle of the night and writing poetry and feeling my heart, to realize that actually that is what is being asked of me. It's not just made up, and I'm going to take it on. And so I did a ceremony to, take it on and commit to doing the best I could to live as Braveheart, even though, as most soul names, it felt incredibly challenging, because I'm shy and scared in a lot of ways. I had, and since then, since that was 15 years ago, I've had a lot more pieces and a lot more soul encounters and a lot more things happen in the last 15 years. But even now, I would say 15 years later, there's other mysterious threads to that name, like my Irish ancestry, and the rock that called me, that have kind of continued to play in my psyche. Is like a name oftentimes isn't solid, like, well, it's this. It's more like a mystery that unravels over time and keeps giving to you forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can really relate to that. I was fortunate enough to receive a name, and then I approached my elders, and they agreed with me. And one of my elders who's crossed over, it was his first naming ceremony, and I felt so honored. And you're right. When I connect with the name in specific ways, I feel like there's another layer there. There's something else for me to, I don't know, absorb perhaps, to assimilate in a way. So I really understand what you're saying. But when I had that connection, it brought me to a different appreciation for the natural world, because it's not just structure and form. There's a presence there. There's an essence there. There's guidance there. There's a way to connect that speaks to us, but it uses a different language. And I think that's why we're so resistant to it, because it doesn't speak our language. We have to be open to hearing its language. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yep, exactly. And I think that's that's the challenge of listening, isn't it? When people go out on wanders in nature, sometimes it can be hard at first, like, oh, I didn't hear anything, or oftentimes something was said, but we missed it. And I believe nature and soul are speaking all the time. And so part of it is, how do I attune myself so that I can actually hear what's being said? How can I make myself ready to hear what wants to be said?
I like that. How to make myself ready to hear it. There's research now. I don't have the author's name at the top of my head. He's from Germany, and he's telling us in his book on trees that the trees cry. That the trees...
The hidden language of trees?
Yes, that's it.
I love that book. I love that book. And
the trees cry when there's something really wrong out there. They communicate when, somebody, a half an acre away needs a nutrient. They scramble, and they have this communication system to help each other out. And I'm blown away by that type of connection. And I suspect that people like Bach and Beethoven must have this extrasensory hearing, and they've actually heard some of the sounds from nature, and they've been able to put it in music for us to understand with our senses,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at music.
There's a gal that is going to be coming up on my podcast who does just that with plants, and I'm really looking forward to her research and what she's discovered on that level. Rebecca, do you have like 3 tips or something that my listeners can take away today to bring into their everyday life with the work that you do?
Yeah. Well, I think Bill's books are a great resource, especially starting with Soulcraft and Wild Mind. Reading those and seeing if they touch you or open you, and the practices that they offer in there. There's a ton of them. I would say spend time in nature. Spend time in nature, and not time necessarily where you're doing something, but where you can just sit back and listen and consider, what if the others could speak to you? What if they have an animate being, an animate presence? What if you could have a conversation? What if there's an intelligence here, a relationship you could open yourself to? What would you say to them? What do you imagine you might hear them saying to you?
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Grandmother Twyla Nietzsche, she was the matriarch of the Seneca clan. She's crossed over a number of years ago, but she actually has a book where she received a small stone, and that stone spoke to her and gave her the history of the world from their perspective. And that's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? That we can actually get that kind of information from a stone. And in their tradition, they're considered the record keepers. So there's countless stories in the Native community about people who fall asleep on a rock and they end up with a whole story about what might have happened there, or some kind of message for being there. And I think that's for the second point that you mentioned. We forget how healing it is to just be in nature. And I'm assuming that the work that you do with your guides and your different trips, people have a chance to breathe again and dismiss all the technology and just feel the wind and sit on the rocks and smell the water. And we don't always make time for that, do we?
Yeah, exactly. Our lifestyle is a little bit too busy, right? Too full. And it's hard to listen and hear if we're already full, if our mind's already kind of hyperactive. So how can we open ourselves to listen and, the vulnerability of the conversation and what wants to be said?
Right. Anything else? Anything else you'd like to add today?
Well, it's just you asked for another tip, so I'd say dreams. And I know you said you have a series coming up on that. I'm super big into dreams, but every night we get personal messages, guidance. The others come to us in dreams. God comes to us, whatever we want to say. The higher intelligence comes to us in the dream time. And so record your dreams in the present tense. Write them down. Present tense makes it more here and now, and we're a little closer to it than when we write it in the past tense. It's kind of distancing our ego from it. So, yeah.
Great tip. Great tip. It's one of my passions. So I love that you said that. And so before we end, do you have your contact information for my listeners? I'd love them to have your website, any upcoming classes you'd like to promote.
Yeah, I have my website is just my name, Rebecca Wildbear, RebeccaWildbear.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter then as well on my website, and all my contact information, phone number, and email are on my website, RebeccaWildbear.com. And as far as programs, I have a river one coming up that I'm very excited about. As I mentioned, diving into bringing people into the rivers, into the wilderness of the river, and riding on the river is a real passion for me, and doing this work on the river. So June 4th to the 9th, we have a wild yoga journey on the river trip where we're going to do yoga, being with the river, dream work, conversations with the land, and ceremony for a whole week out there. And I have a promo, so people sign up by April 20th for the river trip. You get a free dream session, free 60-minute dream session. So hopefully some people might be interested. And then the next program I have after that coming up is a Wild Mind program that's camping near the Telluride, Colorado area. So if you want to delve more into Bill Plotkin's Wild Mind model, you can sign up for that. And then I have doing a training up in Vancouver, a mirroring training for people in the Wild Mind training program in Animas, and a quest in August. So those are in the mountains here in Colorado. So those are some upcoming things, but they're all on my website. So if you want to head onto my website, you can look at them all more closely.
That's wonderful. I appreciate that, and I think the listeners appreciate that as well. I noticed that you talk a lot about poetry with the dreams, and there's poetry on your blog, on your website, on Bill's. Do you have anything at your fingertips we could end with?
Sure, I know some poems by heart. Which one shall we go with?
Whatever connects us to the earth.
Okay, well, how about Mary Oliver's Wild Geese? That's one of my favorites. Do you know that one?
I know of that one. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's great because one of the things sometimes that I think stops us from connecting to the earth is we've been domesticated. We've been trained, not to get dirty, to act civilized in a particular way. But the first line of this poem, Wild Geese, is, "You do not have to be good."
I love it.
You do not have to be good. You do not have to crawl on your hands and knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. It's our wild animal body. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I'll tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of rain are moving across the landscape. The mountains, the rivers, the prairies, the deep forests. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls out to you, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That is wonderful. Well, I can only say thank you 1,000 times for joining us at Holistic Nature of Us. And I hope all of you feel as inspired as I do by Rebecca Wildbear, her talk, her practical advice, and reminding us about our wild nature. So this is Judith Dreyer, the author of At the Garden's Gate, book and blog. For more information, go to my website, judithdreyer.com, and you will find information about this podcast as well as the transcript. Goodbye, everyone, and have a great day.